All right. Hello there. This is Mark Tooley, president of the Institute on Religion and Democracy. And wonderfully, I am conversing with our IRD longtime board member, journalist Fred Barnes, who I believe has been with IRD for at least 15 years, maybe longer than that, having been befriended by my revered late predecessor, Diane Nippers. And we've been very grateful for his contributions and support over the last 2 decades. Fred Barnes, of course, has an extensive resume and background, having been the founding co-editor of the Weekly Standard and been with the Standard throughout the duration of its history. And now he's with the Washington Examiner. And for those of us who are old enough to recall, of course, he was prominent on the infamous McLaughlin Group for many years, where he cheerfully endured the abuse of the host, John McLaughlin, who would refer to him as Fred the Beetle Barnes. And prior to that or during that was involved, was a contributor and staffer with the New Republic back in those ancient of days. So Fred, thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and I'm a proud member of the board of IRD, I would say. And it's and I think I've gotten a lot more out of IRD than IRD has gotten out of me.
We are very generous to say that we feel like we've gotten a lot out of you, and we're going to continue to squeeze you for
all right.
Any parts of your background that I omitted that are important and should be lifted up?
Well, not really. You know, I come from a military background. My dad, my uncle, my grandfather all went to West Point. I was supposed to go there, and I went in the Army to get an appointment, and I got one, and then I decided I didn't want to go to West Point, so I didn't. And got into even in high school, I'd been writing, covering high school football games and everything. So I liked journalism. Went into that after the University of Virginia, and write it. And didn't. I was never a sports writer, but I wrote about politics and still do. And I had a nice career with the Washington Evening Star and then the Baltimore Sun. And but one of the things that really changed how I have done journalism, I think, is an event in the early 1980s when I really accepted Jesus Christ into my life, and my wife did. She had come from an entirely unchurched background, and it just changed. It changed our marriage. It changed our life. It changed how our kids turned out too, and it came about. When I hear parents not complain, but just sort of say how sad they are that their children have not followed them into being believers, and they've sort of given up on trying to convert their children or to bring them to Christ. And when this happened to me, and my mother was the single most important person, I think I was 35. I was mid-career. I wasn't really worried about my soul in particular. I had no great ambition to be a Christian, and yet I wound up being one. And it was really because of people I met. I would run into Christians, or they'd run into me. I used to think that was purely accidental, knowing how the way God works, that nothing is accidental. So, and I was so impressed with them. And then there was my mother and father, but particularly my mother, who was a great evangelist, very subtle, and worked on me. And anyway, we went through this for a couple of years, and then finally one day my sister and her husband were at our house here in Virginia, and we started talking about religion. Or I didn't bring it up, they did. And the next thing you know, my wife and I are kneeling on the floor of our living room and expressing our acceptance of Christ. And I didn't think that was going to change my life much, but of course it did. So Um, it was such a, I mean, just such an incredibly important event. And, you know, my wife's mother, 94 years old, just died. And she did not come from a church background. She went some as a youngster growing up in Loudoun County, Virginia, a suburb now of Washington. Used to be just countryside, but she, my wife, during her closing days, talked to her a lot about Jesus. And one morning, when they got up, her mother told her that she had had a dream about Jesus. And he told her, I forget the exact quote. She had an exact quote from Jesus and what he told her, and that is that he was her savior.
Hmm.
My view is that when Jesus comes into your dreams, he's taking you to somewhere when you die, and that's to heaven.
Yeah.
So we think he did. And I mean, that makes us feel better, but my wife and I, but you know, that doesn't really count for much. What counts is what happened to her. And it was just so striking. It was, I mean, I consider it a miracle, but you know, Jesus does miracles all the time, but this one really came home to us.
Absolutely. Well, that's quite a powerful blessing at age 94, no less.
Indeed. I certainly
Well,
so.
well, you became a Christian as a young journalist.
Mhm.
How or did that change how you did journalism after that?
Yeah, well, it did, and I just became, you know, like most journalists now, but particularly it's gotten a lot worse, are so negative, and you know, it used to be you try to cover the news and say what went on, and now so many journalists, particularly at the big papers and big news outfits, thinks that they have to be the people that decide on accountability. Who's accountable for this? You know, I mean, and then we see it now, of course, with the America and our government working on the whole virus problem here and COVID-19 and so on, and they're blaming each other. Who's responsible? Who didn't get enough masks for us, and and where are the ventilators when we need them, and so on and all. And it's really and that's what they do. Who's accountable if anything goes wrong? And of course, journalism now sees very little that goes right. Then okay, who is accountable? This is what they do. Who's to blame, basically?
Right.
And we certainly see that in the big newspapers, and we see it on television, and it's a very unfortunate development in journalism. It's completely different from what I went into journalism for and what it was for so many years. And, you know, it has such a pull. You know, I try to avoid being somebody who, whenever I write a piece, I'm blaming somebody or finding out who's accountable for this or that. But you get tugged in, you really do. And I'm afraid it happens to me too.
It's like there's a spiritual need for a scapegoat. There's a theological point there somewhere.
Indeed, there is. Yeah, I agree. There is that, and that's what there is. There is that need, and we see so much with you know, it's President Trump, or if it's not, it's somebody else, and you know, both sides, left and right, are looking for for scapegoats, and if they can't find them, well, they'll just designate somebody.
Yeah. Well, Fred, you've been a very dedicated churchman over the last 35 years, involved with a large Anglican Church initially, and then involved with its church plant over the last 10 years. And I believe your son-in-law has also become a clergyman in a very strong church in Northern Virginia.
He has. It's in Vienna, Virginia, and it meets in a high school, James Madison High School in Vienna, Virginia. That's not the church that we're members of, but my wife and I, of course, go there a lot, and it's a wonderful church. it's so different than the one that we go to in Alexandria, which is called Christ the King, and it's a great church. And if you just walked in it, you'd say, well, gee, this is a bunch of Episcopalians. And of course, a lot of them were, as my wife and I were, and my parents were Episcopalians for years, and they left the Episcopal Church too. But but you go into their church in Vienna, Virginia, and it's much more informal. You don't see. One time when I was there, I looked around to see if anybody but me had a tie on there. Nope, it was only me. Mm-hmm. and it's a lot of families, crawling with kids, a lot of immigrants. It's just completely different, but encouraging.
And also an Anglican church. So
Anglican Church, yeah. The Anglican churches are really booming now and spreading out more and more in Northern Virginia, where I've lived most of my life, and I know a little about, but I hear great things elsewhere. And the problems that you had with the Episcopal Church, and mainly whether the people who ran the church still believed in the virgin birth and the resurrection and whether scripture is something we can just read for fun, or whether it's really true. And the Anglican Church is where you want to go, because it's very traditional, and if you want something that's more that says, well, Jesus, maybe there was a virgin birth, or maybe not, or something, any of those things, then the Episcopal Church is the place for you, but not for me anymore.
Well, Fred, you'll want to watch my video interview of yesterday with Gerald McDermott discussing his new book on the glories of Anglicanism.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, that sounds great.
You'll love it.
Well, we're finding a lot of them. I mean, it really is, and I mean, the liturgy is pretty much the same, but the sermons and everything else is quite different and better.
Fred, calling upon your powers of prophecy and spiritual discernment, do you see any signs, or are you hopeful of any kind of spiritual revival taking place in America, especially after the coronavirus passes, and maybe there's a moment of new sobriety in at least parts of American culture?
I've thought about that, Mark, and but I really haven't formed an opinion. My wife accuses me of being a chronic optimist, and I guess I am, but I do see. I'll tell you what I have seen, and that is the way the Anglican churches I know here in Northern Virginia have adjusted to the whole crisis with COVID-19. I mean, and they really have, with their Sunday services, which I can watch the way I can see you now, and they're just they've done so well. My son-in-law out in Vienna does his in his backyard, unless it's raining, then he does it inside, and gives the sermons he would. He's sitting there. He always likes a fire, so if he's outside, he has his barbecue with a bunch of wood burning in it, and it's they have really adjusted well, and they haven't missed a beat. And I think it tells you a lot, that the way they can just hit the ground running as they have on this. It's true of Christian schools as well. One of our daughters who lives in a few miles away from us here, she and her husband and 4 kids. The 4 kids go to a small Christian school called Rivendell in Arlington, Virginia. And the moment that the governor declared that all schools were closed for the rest of the academic year, and they got in the car and immediately drove to Florida, where we have a house, and commandeered it. And they just got back. They were there for 6 weeks. Within 2 days, that school was giving them lessons that they could get, and they could communicate like I'm communicating with you, with their teachers, and three of the kids, one's an infant, so was not in the school yet, but and that went on for weeks and weeks. They didn't miss a beat. They really did it well. And I'm a technological boob myself, but they seem to be really have jumped on this so well and so effectively that I think there's a reason for optimism there. And the more the more people see what's going on with the Anglican Church in America, I just think they're going to be attracted by it, particularly when they see the political environment in the country. Now, I say this as someone who spent a good deal of his life writing about politics, and I like politics. I don't like the tone and the anger and the hatred and of politics in America at the moment, nor do I like the accountability and blame finding and everything that we see in journalism today. Well, you're not and the Anglican Church is very much not a political church. The two churches I know well, this third daughter who went off to Florida and stayed in the house we have down there, a half a block from the beach. So their kids liked it. She goes to a separate Anglican church, which is in Arlington, Virginia. So we're spread pretty good among the Anglican churches, and they are just booming, I think, and they, I think, give what so many people I talk to want, and it's not a political sermons or a political vision or even a small amount of that. They want none of it, and I agree with that. It really is something that has been a surprise to me, actually, how great it would be. I thought, well, when we went to this big Episcopal church, the Falls Church, in Northern Virginia for a long time. And then when it left the Episcopal Church, we did too, and we didn't know where we were going. And anyway, wound up in this Anglican church, and it's turned out to be something wonderful that I hadn't expected. I mean, I was going to go there anyway, but I'm glad it's turned out so well, and I think it has for others as well.
Well, Fred, the Anglican Church in North America needs to hire you as their public affairs director. You're obviously their most enthusiastic booster.
Well, I am, and so are a lot of other people. I'm not alone in my enthusiasm. Now, look, it helps that my son-in-law and his wife, my daughter, Sarah, does so much at their church as well, and they have so many wonderful people there, and it's amazing when they can do this, and they have in a high school auditorium. That's where they meet, and I'm sort of used to something that's more, looks like something that was built, 400 years ago, but in a high school, and and I love going there.
Of course, your congregation meets in a Baptist church, as I recall.
Yeah, not a Southern Baptist church, but a Northern Baptist church that is a church for people in the arts and so on. And they're not a whole lot of them. We'd love to work out a deal. I mean, just rent the space there, and it's a nice church. And physically, it's perfect for a congregation of 300 or 400 people. And we'd like to buy it from them, but they seem to want to hold on to it.
Well, Fred, it's been great talking with you. Any final words of wisdom or hope about the country or the church as we hopefully head into the final stages of the pandemic? We hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I certainly hope so. We'll see what happens when we start moving out of all these restrictions. And I'll have to say, I have been very, very conscious about not wandering around and going out. I've been quarantined. I've really taken the quarantine seriously. It has a lot to do once you've gotten to your 70s. You tend to worry more. Even I can see the statistics and who this stuff tends to affect harmfully the most. I'm used to sitting here on my couch a lot, because I've been here. But I was thinking about your question that I partially answered earlier, and that's the question about being optimistic, and there is a reason that it has nothing to do with the crisis over the virus, but it just sort of the way things to work. And I have seen, as you have, and IRD is written about and disputed, but so much written and said about how Christianity's a goner. It's just fading. And the church population is shrinking. And all the stuff that's been said and written and so on, and how secular the country has. And of course, it has become awfully secular and so on. But when that happens, now when you see how, it's just so remarkable, and so much is written about it, and how the decline of Christianity. When they start writing about that, what is bound to be around the corner, and that's a revival.
Mm-hmm.
It just, I think things work that way. I mean, God and Christ, they are really clever that way. Just when everybody's saying, boy, that Christianity, it's a thing of the past, they're going to see a boom. And I want to be a part of that. I want to see it. I want to welcome people. When I became a Christian, I had pretty much ignored it for years. I mean, my parents are Episcopalians, and as a youngster, I went to an Episcopal church and so on. But it's so great when you see people that are. One of the thrilling things to me now is to see people who are like me, who were so excited when they first took Christ into their lives, and I just think we're going to see so much more of that. The more the newspapers and television and everything says how gone Christianity is, just the opposite is true. And life is like that.
Fred, thank you. A perfect note on which to end. You're a true man of hope, and I look forward to seeing you in more normal times.
I hope so too. Anyway, thanks, Mark. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Fred. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.